So the second thing I want to mention, which is very big, is the math tasks that are done in classrooms. And I asked the question, how is it possible for students to have and develop and maintain a growth mindset? The idea that learning is all about growth and anybody can learn, when math class is a series of closed questions that you get right or wrong. So most math classes still give students questions that they are short and they're closed. And students think that their job in math classrooms is to get questions right. Now that idea is really goes against the idea of a growth mindset, where students should be thinking that their task in math classrooms is to learn. So I have talked a number of times about how it's very sad that many students think that math is a performance subject, not a learning subject. And what I mean by that is they think that their job in math classrooms is to perform. And that's to do with the tasks that are given out. One of my colleagues said to me that her 6-year-old son had come home and said he hadn't enjoyed math class. And she'd said to him, why? What happened? And he said, because math is too much answer time and it's not enough learning time. And I thought that was amazing that a 6-year-old can see that and has already developed that perception that in math kids think that they're there to perform and to answer questions. So questions and tasks that encourage a growth mindset are ones that really give students the space to learn within them. They're not short questions, and they focus on opportunities to learn. So those tasks really need to be more open. And what I mean by openness, we have, as you can see on the slide, a framework for looking at tasks, and openness in ways of seeing a task. So it should be that when we give math tasks to kids, they don't just think there's one way to do it, but they can see different ways. They may have different entry points into the task, but definitely more different pathways and strategies are valued. And that these more open tasks also need clear learning goals for students. As you open a task and make it bigger, it's more important to put in things that help students with knowing what they should be doing. So I'll talk about that under assessment for learning in a while. But when math tasks are opened, encourage different ways of seeing and different methods, the opportunities for learning and for developing a growth mindset are increased. So another hugely important piece of encouraging a growth mindset is to do with assessment and grading, how we communicate with kids, what we say to them when they do work, what we say to them when they say, I'm stuck and I can't do this. All of those places are where very strong messages come through. And with assessment and grading, one study that I think is very important is one that was done on grading, where they divided students into 2 groups, and in one group they gave them diagnostic feedback on their work and no grade, and the other group they gave them grades. And what they found was the students who got feedback did significantly better over a year. But then they decided to add to the study, and they thought, well, maybe we can give them the best of both worlds. And they gave in the second version, they gave a third group both diagnostic comments and grades. And interestingly, those students did as badly as those who just got grades, and they found that was because that when students had grades, that was all they looked at. So we know that really useful feedback is words to students about what they're doing well and what they're not doing well. And giving students grades, when students are in math classes where they're constantly getting grades, particularly if they're constantly getting low grades, it's very hard for them to have a growth mindset. And also those grades are not particularly useful to them. I mean, usually they just tell them how they're doing compared to others. It doesn't give them helpful information that helps them learn and grow. So I recommend not having any grades over a school year. It's fine to give a grade as a summative assessment, but really not helpful if we really want to push students' learning forward. Another huge one that I'm really interested in doing much more work now with Carol and others. When I was doing a workshop actually last year, and Carol said to the math teachers, she came in for a short time, that every time a student makes a mistake in math, they grow a new synapse. And I remember that moment when she said that, and just realizing how significant that was, because lots of teachers will value mistakes and say mistakes are a good thing, but uniformly kids hate to make mistakes. And when they make a mistake in math, they think that means they're not a math person. There's now been even more research come out which shows how this works. And it turns out that when you make a mistake in math, synapses fire more rapidly and more of them than at any other time. So making mistakes is good for kids. We want them to be able to make mistakes. We want them making mistakes. You learn more when you're making mistakes. Your brain grows more when you make mistakes than at any other time. But as I said, students hate making mistakes, and that's because they've grown up in classrooms where math is all about performance. How can you feel good about making mistakes when you're always having to perform, and when you're judged by tests which don't value mistakes? So most students and some teachers view mistakes negatively, and in my work with teachers, we do a lot around how to reposition mistakes. A lot of math teachers, they care about their kids, and they don't give them tasks where they struggle. They give them tasks where, more or less kids get them right most of the time. That's not good for them. They actually need tasks where they're making mistakes and struggling, but they need to be doing that with the knowledge that that's a good thing for them to be doing. Otherwise, obviously they would just freak out probably if they were making lots of mistakes all the time. So Carol says, when kids come home to their parents, is that one of her messages to parents, that when kids come home and say, oh, I got an A in math class today, or I got all my questions right in math today, or I got all my questions right in a math test today, parents should say, oh, I'm sorry. Obviously, it wasn't pushing you at where you needed to be learning. So we do need to change this idea that we want kids to be getting things right all the time, and we need to put them into classrooms where they have big problems, where they're struggling and making mistakes, but they have resources such as Assessment for Learning uses things like rubrics that help students, and really encourage those growth mindset messages. I always quote one study just to show you the importance of the messages teachers give to kids. And it was a study completed by Jeff Cohen and colleagues, and it was really incredible, I think. What they did was they gave feedback on English essays to high school students, and half of the students got their usual feedback, critical comments on what they did, and comments on what they did right. And the other half got exactly the same, but they got one sentence different, and the sentence said, I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you. So the researchers attached that to half the kids' work. The teachers didn't know who. Those kids who got that one sentence did better a year later in their work, particularly minority kids, who are the ones who, particularly don't feel valued by their teacher. That was one sentence. Now, when I talk to teachers, I always say, I'm not telling you this so you can go out and give students that one sentence, I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you, but to show the power that teachers have in changing kids' ideas about what's important. And obviously, researchers had the chance to attach one sentence. Teachers can give positive feedback about valuing kids, about wanting them to make mistakes, and getting away from any fixed ability language. I must say the teachers in my course, my online course, have been saying, oh, I can't get the word smart out of my vocabulary, and saying, oh, you're so smart. Now, it's very important not to give that message, not to give that fixed message. In fact, you may know that Carol Dweck has found that the reason that so many kids have fixed mindsets is actually parenting in the early years of their lives, where in the US, certainly, it's very common to keep saying, oh, you're so smart, you're so smart. But that's such a fixed message, and what kids receive from that is, oh, I'm smart, that's good. But then later when they fail, and they will, they think, I'm not so smart. So very important always to say, it's so great that you learned that. That's fantastic that you learned that. It's fantastic that you did that. But not to say, wow, you're smart. I do know some teachers who have kind of repositioned smart, so they're constantly talking about how everybody can be smart. We have to learn to be smart, and that's going to make you smart. But it's probably not a good word to use with kids because it has such fixed associations. And I work with teachers to keep praising what kids have done. It's wonderful that you've done that, and keep out the this means you're smart or not smart. So just to finish, it's absolutely critical that teachers and students are encouraged to develop a growth mindset. And, you know, when I work with teachers, and myself too, when we see these ideas about ability, and many of us realize that we have fixed mindsets, or you may have a fixed mindset about one subject and not another. So there are some kids who will work, you know, their socks off, they'll just work and work and work if they fail at something in sport and keep repeating and repeating until they can do it. But if they fail at it in something like math, they'll just say, oh, give up, I can't, I'm not a math person. So it's super important, and teachers too have to, for the sake of their own learning and their own development, have these growth mindsets.